Flamme Rouge. This is a bicycle racing game. It is for 2 to 4 players, so it cannot be played solitaire. But in these days of social distancing, you can play with your family because it is perfectly family friendly. Matter of fact, I played it with my daughters that are now 7 and 9 and they really liked it. I played it with my spouse. We convinced her to give it a try and she liked it also. And my spouse is very hard to please, especially these days. As time goes by, she becomes a more and more discriminating gamer, but this one was wife approved, so that's already some endorsement. In Flamme Rouge, each player will control a team of 2 bikers. One is the sprinter, who wants to go slow most of the time, but can then move fast occasionally, and a roller, who is more of your reliable biker who can always do well. So 2 to 4 players. The first thing that you need to do is to build a track. The game comes with several suggestions of the tracks that you want to build. You may be able to build. There are a lot of tiles. You don't use them all. And what you see here is a track that I just made up, because of course that's the other thing you can do. When you played all of the ones that I recommended, you can just start making up your own, and that is great. As we said, each player will control a team of 2 bikers, a sprinter and a roller, as indicated by the different sculpts and by the letters on the back. However, the teams are only differentiated by colors, so I do not know that a colorblind player will be able to play the game as it comes out of the box. You may have to mark the owners of the bikers somewhere, maybe on the base, maybe in some other way. But that's that. So each player has 2 bikers and you place them behind the starting line at the beginning of the game, and victory condition is pretty simple. The first player to have one of their bikers cross the finish line wins the game. What if there is a tie? Well, the board is divided into squares, as you can see, marked by these solid lines, and each square is then further divided into lanes. The right lane is better, slightly ahead of the other lane within that square. So actually, and the right lane is also marked by a double line on the side, which may not be all that easy to see right now in the camera, but when you are playing the game, it's actually pretty easy to tell which one is double, and which one is single, because of course, quote-unquote, changes as the game goes by. So when you move to a lane, when you finish your movement into a square and there's no one in the right lane, you immediately move there. And that is also the tiebreaker. When 2 bikers are in the same square, the one on the right counts as slightly ahead, which means when we get there, actually, if multiple players cross the finish line in the same turn, the one that is further ahead wins. If they are in the same square, then the one in the right lane wins. And that's how you determine victory. But before we get there, we have to actually do the whole race, the actual race, don't we? Yes, we do. Each player has 2 decks of cards, one for the sprinter and one for the rollers, with numerical values that indicate the specific capabilities, the specific abilities of that biker. Again, roller being more reliable, sprinter being more all or nothing. At the beginning of a turn, each player chooses one of their bikers, draws, it doesn't matter which one, draws 4 cards from that deck, chooses a card, commits that card face down, then you take the remaining one and you place them face up at the bottom of your deck. This is important. And then you repeat the procedure with the other biker. It's important that you commit to a card before you draw cards from the other deck, because you will want your teammates to help each other, but you cannot plan too much. And suppose that this time I decide to commit this one for my roller, and again I place the remaining cards face up at the bottom of the deck without letting anybody C. So everybody does that, and then we start revealing cards. Well, we can reveal the cards once we're done, and then we start resolving cards starting from the biker ahead. If it's the same square, remember lane on the right. And suppose that for this player from this card, actually the blue player had committed a 3 roller goes 3 1 2 3, and then somebody calls. It's good if somebody calls, okay, black roller, and suppose that was a 4 1 2 3 4, empty square, so we go to red line lane, and then we call black sprinter, and suppose that was a 2, and then we call green roller. Suppose that was a whatever puts that guy there, and then this one will move here, and for the green sprinter somebody played a 9 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, which is a terrible idea. Those are in the game, but that's what they did. Once we resolve movement, then we have two phases. One is the slipstream. If there are groups of bikers, and for this purpose a single biker counts as a group. If there are groups of bikers which are exactly one square away from the person in front, then they simply move ahead for free, exploiting the slipstream. And when they do so, they join the other group. If this is the situation, after everybody moves, we have slipstream here, and so this is what happens. You start from the back, moving forward when you check for slipstream. Oh, here also we have slipstream exactly one space ahead. So these two now form a group. Next, what do we have here? We have two squares from the previous person, and so that does not apply for slipstream. After you apply slipstream, then you check for exhaustion. Each biker that does not have somebody immediately in front of themselves gets an exhaustion card in their deck. In this case, the green sprinter would take this exhaustion card. The exhaustion cards have the back exactly like the other ones, but the front simply says 2. So the green sprinter would get an exhaustion card in their deck, and that goes face up at the bottom of your deck. And also the black roller gets an exhaustion card. We take it from the exhaustion card for exhaustion deck for the rollers, and that also goes face up at the bottom of their deck. That's pretty much it. The cards that you played are then discarded out of the game. Each card can only be used once. And we repeat the procedure. Draw 4 cards of one of your bikers, choose one, put the other ones at the bottom. When you get to the point where, of course, you need to draw cards, say at the beginning of my turn, this is my deck, then I draw those two, turn the ones at the bottom face down, shuffle, 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 and get the remaining ones that I need to get to 4. This is how it works. Each turn you commit 2 cards, one per player, reveal, start resolving movement from the front, check for slipstream from the back, give exhaustion to people that don't have anybody right in front of them, and that's how the game works. Now there are 2 types of terrain track tiles that are a little different. A slope going down, marked by those blue squares. When you go down, whichever card you play counts as at least 5. So that's the right time to get rid of your exhaustions, and they will still count as 5. So you move at least by 5 regardless of what you play. If you play more than 5, then you play what you play. You move by what you played. Slope going up, then the maximum movement is 5. The advantage for the slope applies only if you start in a slope going down. The disadvantage for going up applies if you move into or if you start there. So it's a little trickier. It applies a lot more. Going up, each card that you play is worth a maximum of 5. So if you play more than 5, it's a 5. Less than 5, whatever it is. And also there's no slipstream. So it's really hard. It's really hard to pass people when you are going up, which makes perfect sense. Another thing is that if you are moving into a square which is already full, say at the end of my movement I would need to be there, then, oh well, too bad, I get I get bounced 1 back, which means if there is a tight peloton in front of you, especially going up, then it can be really hard to break it because you need to go all the way ahead. Otherwise, you just bounce back until there is a spot that is available. This is how you play Flamme Rouge. You keep playing like this, turn after turn, commit cards, resolve, then check for Slipstream and Exhaustion until a player crosses the finish line, and that player usually wins the game. There are tiebreakers, as I explained, but the idea remains the same. Cross the line and try to win. Flamme Rouge is a game that I picked up in my friendly local game store pretty much the day before my daughters, my family, and I went into what could be dramatically called lockdown. Maybe we could call it precautionary staycation, but when we started staying at home and only I and my wife go out when necessary for work or to get groceries, the day before we went into that mode, we picked up that game. I picked up that game because, well, I wanted to support my friendly local game store, and the theme appeals to me. I like racing games, which is funny because I don't like races in real life. I never watched any. It doesn't interest me, but I like the tension from racing games, you know, Formula D or Rallyman, all good stuff. Flamme Rouge is fun. It really works well. I like that it has that deck building and deck unbuilding, deck destroying element as your deck changes constantly. You're trying to keep it clean. But it's also okay to get exhaustion from time to time, and maybe you spend those exhaustion cards in doing a downward slope. Because actually by getting those and getting rid of those, then you're saving the better cards for the later parts of the game. You want to optimize it ideally. You want to have your sprinters having almost only the 9 cards as their last 2 cards, and then they just go. And the first time that I saw that I realized that I felt and I feared that the game could be anticlimactic. Does it always get to just whoever performs the double 9 with the sprinters in the last turn? Yes and no, because you still have to get there, and there are scenarios actually in which the last section of the game is just going up, and so the 9s are not any better than the 5s. So there are just different things there that make the game a lot more interesting, especially in the final phases. And it really gives you the sense of an arc. That really gives you the sense of a progression. One risk that you have with racing games, of course, is if the game makes you do the same thing over and over again from point A to point B. But good racing games, of course, create a build-up. And here you have a really nice element in the fact that your deck changes constantly and you're trying to manipulate it, you're trying to optimize it. I like a lot the fact that you can, that you're creating teamwork between your bikers for sure, but actually you can also make deals with other players. So there's nothing in the rules, I believe, that prevents you from doing so. You can make agreements, which are not binding necessarily, but so you can try to help each other with Slipstream, and that is also another interesting element. Of course, if you are playing with your family and you make deals with your kids, try to honor them unless you like to see them cry, and that's completely up to you. So, it's a game that definitely works for the entire family. I played it with my 7-year-old daughter, with my 9-year-old daughter, and we managed to convince my wife to play it also. She doesn't play many games these days, or I should say before our staycation she didn't. We have been able to involve her in gaming a lot more. She likes really linear, simple games. She likes to play games occasionally, but she doesn't like to learn games all that much, so they have to get games that are easy to learn. This is a perfect family game in that sense, because you can play with children, you can play with casual gamers that are not into learning rules all that much, and yet the flow of the game is very fun, it's very fast. The action is interesting because you're constantly involved. There is an interesting rubber banding. If you're too much ahead, then of course you start getting a lot of exhaustion cards, too much. So there are just self-regulating elements that keep the action tight and they keep the action interesting. Flamme Rouge, definitely fun game for the entire family. Great production values. It looks really great. I think it captures the theme very well. By the way, most of what I know about the theme comes from other biking games rather than from the real thing. But, well, I don't know if it captures the theme or it captures some conventions of the genre. Either way, it feels right, it plays right, it feels thematic, but most important, it has gameplay which is captivating and exciting, and has a lot of interesting decisions when it comes to the diplomacy with other players, the teamwork within your own team, and deck management. Definitely high endorsement from me for Flamme Rouge. Really fun game.